We, uh, we start with the federal conviction of LA City Councilman Mark Ridley Thomas for bribery and conspiracy. With us now is Neama Rahmani, who is president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, also a former federal prosecutor and former director of enforcement of the LA City Ethics Commission. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So here's a guy, Mark Ridley Thomas, LA City Council, State Assembly, State Senate, County Board of Supervisors, back to the LA City Council. He's been on the political scene since I think it's 1991, maybe even earlier than that. What does this conviction say about him? And what message does it send to the people who voted for him all of those years?
Today is a huge day in LA City and LA County history. I mean, we're talking about someone who is an icon of local politics here, not just him and his son. And for Ridley Thomas to be convicted of federal fraud charges and almost certainly going to be sentenced to prison, this was something that would have been unheard of just a few years ago.
You know, as we have more of these investigations and we find out more things, there seems to be just this smell of corruption over so much of city and county government. Is this indicative of more to come? I mean, we've already seen and heard quite a bit, not just convictions, but, you know, other allegations as well. Is there more to come?
Oh, I believe that we're going to hear a lot more and see a lot more. This is probably just the beginning. Obviously, we've seen many other scandals in LA City Hall. We've seen issues with our former sheriff, obviously other cities here in LA County. And one of the issues with living here, you have these public servants who are not making a whole lot of money, and there's a lot of opportunity for them, whether it's entitlements or public projects, or in this case, government contracts, to make others a lot of money. So, you know, when you have public servants with their hand out and you have an aggressive district attorney's office, an aggressive public corruption section of the U.S. Attorney's Office, I think we're going to see a lot more of these investigations and indictments.
You know, you mentioned other scandals, other corruption scandals involving LA city and county government. And that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because, as you know, unlike, say, New York and Chicago and Boston, the political infrastructure in LA was deliberately designed to have weakened power, presumably to head off the kinds of corrupt practices that over and over again we have seen in this city and in this county. So what happened? What went wrong with that thinking? It was supposed to be more fail-safe.
Well, on one hand, you could argue that there's more corruption, but on the other, you can say that more corruption is being rooted out, right? You know, so you have, you know, we talked about the Ethics Commission that I was enforcement director of. That is something that was created in the 90s of the LA City Police Commission. So, you know, folks are saying, well, you know, the police commission, they're finding all this corruption and, you know, excessive force and other violations by LAPD. Well, the argument could be, well, this was always occurring, but for these watchdogs and prosecutors and inspector generals and agencies that are overseeing our elected officials and law enforcement, for decades, this was probably happening, and none of these folks were being held accountable.
Very quickly, Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, figures into this. The U.S. attorney said that Karen Bass's USC social work degree was critical to this investigation, and there were email exchanges referencing Karen Bass as well into this. As far as you know, what more is being done to look into this? Or are we going to hear more about this down the road?
I think this isn't the end of Karen Bass and the USC just as an institution. I mean, Dean Flynn, obviously slightly different, but there are emails, and she was a star witness in this case, implicating Karen Bass. I'm not saying that she's a subject or target of any investigation, but it's certainly problematic from an optics perspective at best, and she may have criminal problems at worst. So, you know, things aren't looking good for the mayor right now.
I'm curious about the former dean at USC, who, of course, is pivotal to this whole case with Mark Ridley Thomas. Part of her agreement was apparently not to testify. Was that an unusual move, or is there a reason you think the prosecutors agreed to that? Because one would have thought she could have been a powerful witness.
Well, the agreement didn't force her to testify, but it didn't specifically say that she wouldn't testify. And when you're a prosecutor and you're relying on cooperator testimony, one of the challenges you have is the defense is going to always argue that, well, this is a rat. Here's someone that is lying just to save herself and get a reduced sentence. So whenever you structure an agreement like the U.S. Attorney's Office did and say, listen, we're going to give you an opportunity to plead guilty, but there's going to be no promises made on either side. And that allows the witness to get on the stand and Dean Flynn to testify, listen, I'm responsible, I'm guilty, I haven't been promised anything. It makes for a much better witness than if you make those promises on the front end. And I do believe her testimony was critical. And we're still trying to get a sense of the jury verdict, but the juror who has spoken out, the foreperson, said that $100,000 scheme to take money from the Ridley Thomas campaign and funnel it to Sebastian, his son, was really sort of critical in proving the bribery scheme here.
All right, and we are going to have more coverage on this all day today here on KNX. Thank you, Neama Rahmani, president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers.